Hello, everybody, and welcome to Slash Pick. That's probably the wrong tone to go into like our slasher movie. Hey, everybody, come on down.
Horror movies, come on.
Come on down to Slash Pick. This is the movie where we talk about This is the show. God, I'm just fumbling the ball over the place. This is the show where we talk about slasher movies. I'm your host, DJ Wooldridge. With me, as always, is Adam Lavick.
Oh, hi there.
See, that's the energy. You got to get that Wolfman Jack.
I'm ready to murder someone. Let's go.
Oh my goodness! Are you ready to talk about some thrills and kills?
Oh yeah, some very 70s grindhouse.
Very
style
70s
murder.
Yeah, very 70s. So we're talking about 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oh snap! Oh, I'm guessing by the shape of that's like a 4K. Is it a steelbook? Is it a steelbook?
4K steelbook.
Ooh,
What's
baby.
up? What's up? It's good.
Let's
It's
bring
real
up this
good.
poster. I love this poster.
It's so great.
Because it's smart. It's smart because we've got, if you're watching the video here, bigger than the title. It says, "Who will survive and what will be left of them," which is such a great way to set what the movie's doing. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean what'll be left of them?
So then we get a little bit of a Leatherface on the right hand side with some text there that says America's most bizarre and brutal crimes, and then below the title, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in quotations for some reason. What happened is true. Now the motion picture that's just as real. And I love that subheading because it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. For one, this isn't true. This is one of the classic horror movies. Love to do this. I'm excited to eventually get to The Strangers when it's like, this is a true story. And then you find out about the story that inspired it. Like, you just lied to me is what you did. That's a lie. But then it's like, now the motion picture that's just as real. What is that? It's a motion picture. What do you mean it's just as real?
You mean the images move? Like, what are you getting at here?
What do you mean that these people, you actually killed your cast members?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
We'll get into some of the BTS. They did almost kill a few of the cast members. This does not sound like a great shoot to have been on. But Adam, what is your history with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Oof, So my history with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of all over the place, truthfully.
Yeah.
I think the first one that I saw was the one with Matthew McConaughey, and I cannot remember for the life of me which one that is.
Who knows?
But I think it came out in like 95. And that was a movie that I used to play on HBO all the time, and I would always catch glimpses of them sitting at that dinner table.
Yeah.
And it was like McConaughey really unhinged. And then eventually I got into the Michael Bay produced remakes from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like one of the last ones that I saw. To be totally honest, I actually have not seen every single entry in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. So I don't even know exactly how many there are. I think there might be around like 6 or 7 of them.
There's more than you'd think.
Probably.
You know?
I did watch the one that came out on Netflix a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Spoiler, it's really bad. Mm-hmm. It's really rough. And then the first one, I honestly don't remember exactly when I saw that one. It might have been somewhere in the 2010s, but it had been a long time since I had watched it. First thing I forgot was how short it is and how tight it is, which I appreciate. But yeah, so it's kind of all over the place. Not one that I discovered at an early age, something that I discovered maybe like in my late teens. And the first one I hadn't seen, in a really long time. So it was really good to rewatch this and kind of get a refresher because there were things that I kind of forgot about the movie.
So it looks like there are 9 movies in the franchise. Yeah, looks like there's 9 movies here listed on the Wikipedia. I definitely haven't seen all of them. I've seen the first 2, and I'm very excited for us to get to the second one because that movie's out of its gourd. One. So as I mentioned in our previous episode, Psycho, I grew up in a more conservative household, wasn't watching a lot of horror movies until I got to college age, and one of my closest friends, huge Texas Chainsaw fan, and so introduced me to the first Texas Chainsaw movie, and I don't know that I have revisited it since then until this show. And you're right, it's very tight, and it's very much of its time. You know what I mean? In that, it obviously, one of the reasons, we're tackling this one so early is it pioneers a lot of what will become true of a lot of slash movies. You've got a big hulking masked killer that likes to use power tools to murder his prey. You've got all the stuff that Cabin in the Woods made fun of. Like, you've got the Harbinger, the guy that's there, like, are you sure you guys want to go do that? All that kind of stuff. But it's interesting how effective aspects of it still are today.
Yeah, really, really effective. And I think part of it, and I'm sure we'll get into it, is just how it's also filmed. It's very handheld.
Yeah.
They're just running around with a camera. It almost has this like weird voyeuristic documentary style feel to it in certain parts.
Yeah.
And I think that really adds to it. So when you get to the latter part of the film where things go awry, it really kind of makes you feel like you're in the scenes with the characters sometimes, because just of the handheld nature of everything.
Absolutely.
And I just love the look of it. Like, it's so rough and so dirty, and I appreciate that so much. And it has a little bit of like that grindhouse feel to it. So yeah, that's the things that I think I really enjoy about this movie is just like, it's so low budge and kind of shitty. But it works so incredibly well for this particular movie.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there's moments, we'll get to it, where it's like, oh yeah, you guys are padding the runtime on this part right here. You're kind of padding, because there's a sequence at the end where the poor leading lady, I think it's actress Marilyn Burns, they just have her screaming for like 20 minutes.
Okay. The screaming in this movie. I forgot how much screaming is in this movie, and that sequence you're talking about, maybe 85 minutes into that scene, I was like, I think I'm good.
Yeah. I think I get what she's freaking out. I think I understand.
I think I got it.
And you also feel bad because it's like this woman had to have lost her voice, because they're not ADRing this shit. They're just having her scream and scream and scream and scream and scream. So a little bit about the movie. It came out on October 11th, 1974. The synopsis is: 5 friends head out to rural Texas to visit the grave of a grandfather. On the way, they stumble across what appears to be a deserted house, only to discover something sinister within. Something armed with a chainsaw. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 89% tomato score and an audience score of 82%. It was directed by Tobe Hooper and written by Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel. A little bit like we'd like to do on this show, we're taking these slasher movies chronologically for the most part. So we're going to go get in our terror time machine and see what was going on in 1974. And the headline for Psycho, that is still unfortunately a little bit of headline. This is 14 years later, I believe. I think Psycho was 1960. This is 1974. 14 years later, still a little bit of Vietnam. Sorry, bummer for all you. They're probably all gone now. Most of you are all gone now. But everybody that got sucked into that conflict, I feel that's blows. Goddamn, 14 years. Anyway, but the new one we're gonna pop up through 1974 is Watergate. Adam, ooh, you ready for some Watergate?
Oh no.
So January 4th, citing executive privilege, President Richard Nixon refuses to surrender 500 tapes and documents which have been subpoenaed by the Senate Watergate Committee. Ooh, he could get away with that now. 2024, he could get away with that now, but not in 1974, baby. We were still pretending like the rules mattered.
We were a society.
Yeah, there was still a sense of decorum, I guess. Here's another one that's going to pop up a little bit in 1974. Johnny Lenz is attacked in her bedroom by serial killer Ted Bundy. She survives. Ted Bundy is tearing it up at this time. January 6th, in response to the energy crisis, daylight savings time commences nearly 4 months early in the United States. That was a weird one. Happy Days first debuted in January 15th. So the same year,
Wow.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is hitting theaters. Happy Days is airing on TVs.
Wow. That's crazy. I didn't even realize this. Now that we're talking about it, this is the 50th anniversary of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Pertinent. Math. We planned that, everybody. 50 years. Gosh, dang it.
Wow. Goddamn.
So in February 4th, newspaper heiress Patricia Hearst is kidnapped and by this Symbionese Liberation Army. She will later join them in a bank robbery. This is just the highlights, folks. I'm not getting into the nitty gritty. Just a little, but if you're familiar, you've probably heard of Patricia Hearst and Symbionese Liberation Army before. Samuel Bick attempts to hijack an airplane with the intent to crash it into the White House and assassinate President Nixon. He commits suicide when the police stormed the plane. Shocked I'd never heard that story before. On March 8th, the OPEC nations end a 5-month oil embargo against the United States, Europe, and Japan. Also on March 18th, after 23 consecutive years on television, Lucille Ball appears in the finale of Here's Lucy.
Wow.
If you're familiar with Lucille Ball, Here's Lucy is her show that you don't know about. It is the one that's not I Love Lucy. First recorded crime, a ransacking that is definitively attributed to Joseph James D'Angelo, at this time a police officer who will commit at least 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 120 burglaries up to 1986. He will not be arrested until 2018. This is another person I'm not familiar with.
Jesus.
But I do think, like, the reason I pull some stuff like that, you're like, why that? That's not. But it definitely, I feel like it sets a mood for why somebody might feel inclined to make a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. April 2nd, the 46th Academy Awards ceremony hosted by Burt Reynolds, Diana Ross, John Huston, and David Niven is held. George Roy Hill's The Sting wins 7 awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. The film is tied with William Friedkin's The Exorcist in receiving 10 nominations. So that's interesting context to me, because The Sting, to me, it's funny. Same with Happy Days. When you catch stuff like us, stuff that came before our time, like as a child, like, so the Happy Days is set in the 50s, therefore it is the 50s. And it's like, no, that was 70. That was being nostalgic then. You're enjoying somebody else's nostalgia. Same with The Sting. Feels like a very much older movie than something like Texas Chainsaw, but it is also a contemporary of The Exorcist, which is interesting. Exorcist is a movie we wouldn't cover on this show because it's not a slasher.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Trust me. As soon as you said Exorcist, I was like, why are we? That's why.
That's why it's not a slasher. Why. It's a good one. It's a good one. I mean, if we expanded it to stuff like the Exorcists of the world, like we would never get out of certain years. Like if it's just horror movies, and then anyway, we chose a theme. It's slashers. April 22nd, the Hi-Fi murders. 5 people are brutally tortured by a group of men during a robbery at a home audio store in Ogden, Utah, resulting in 3 deaths. God damn. The House of Representatives Judiciary Committee opens formal hearings in the impeachment process against Richard Nixon. You know what? We'll just summarize that one. Richard Nixon is about what ends up happening in 1974 is Richard Nixon is about to be impeached. Word comes down the wire that's going to happen, and he quits. And so we get this is the
he
year.
Goes, I'm out.
When people had like a sense of like legacy or whatever. Anyway, Heaven's Gate, an American millennial New Age religious group, is founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in May 18th of 1974. In June 26th, the first UPC is scanned. June 30th, Alberta Williams King, the mother of the late Martin Luther King, is killed during a church service in Atlanta, Georgia. I did not know she was also killed. That fucking blows. That's real shitty.
Wow.
2 weeks after the attractions open, an 18-year-old employee is crushed to her death while working on America Sings at Disneyland. This is the first employee fatality at a Disney park. This is on July 8th. On July 14th, serial killer Ted Bundy abducts Janice Ott and Denise Nusland in broad daylight at Lake Sammamish State Park. July 15th, Christine Chubbuck, television presenter in Sarasota, Florida, draws a revolver and shoots herself in the head during a live broadcast. She dies in a hospital 14 hours later, the first person to commit suicide on live television. It bums me out that we need to clarify that was the first. That implies that she was not the last. I believe.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I believe a movie was made about this starring Rebecca Hall that I've wanted to watch because I hear she's good in it. But also, do I want to watch the movie.
Is that the reason why they came up with having a delay on live feeds?
Yeah, I think that probably helped.
Yeah. Yikes.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so Watergate's going on, and Gerald Ford on August 9th, Richard Nixon becomes the first president to resign from the office to avoid impeachment. Vice President Gerald Ford becomes the 38th president upon Nixon's resignation. And then on September 8th, Gerald Ford pardons Richard Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office. I don't think I like that. And then also on September 8th, stuntman Evel Knievel fails in his attempt to rocket across Snake River Canyon in Idaho. October 11th, that brings us to our movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hello.
October 30th, The Rumble in the Jungle between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. November 8th, in Salt Lake City, Utah, Carol DeRonch narrowly escapes abduction by serial killer Ted Bundy, making repeat appearances. She goes on to testify against him at his trial. And November 13th, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murders his family in Amityville, New York. Will we cover the Amityville horror? Good question. I don't know. I don't remember that movie comes out.
DJ.
Undated. That's off the camera. We'll need it. Does that count? I don't think I've seen the Amityvilles. I don't think I've seen the Amityville movies.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I've seen the original and then the remake of the original.
Yeah. Undated, but sometime in 1974, Dungeons and Dragons was first released in the United States in 1974. Wow. Thankfully, nobody will freak out about that. There won't be a whole satanic panic over it. So that is where we're at in 1974. And to set up the movie a little bit more, here's a little bit of behind the scenes, what we like to call behind the mask. Adam, do you know anything about the behind the scenes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Very little. Just some of its inspirations. I know Ed Gein was a partial inspiration for it. I know that director Tobe Hooper had kind of been playing around with an idea for a horror movie, and I think I saw or read somewhere that he was like in a crowd once, and like just like the sheer panic of being in a crowd made him want to like get through people and get out of there.
Yeah.
And he started having some really interesting, crazy thoughts, which I guess if you're a filmmaker, you do have weird thoughts like that sometimes where you're like, oh, if only I could, that might be a good idea for a movie. I'm really messed up in the head.
Yeah.
But it's a movie idea.
Yeah, it got some intrusive thoughts there. So the concept for behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre arose in early 1970s while Tobe Hooper was working as an assistant film director and as a documentary cameraman. He had already developed a story involving elements of isolation, the woods, and darkness. He credited the graphic coverage of violence by San Antonio news outlets as one of the inspirations for the film, and based elements of the plot on the murderer Ed Gein, recurring character in our podcast so far, Ed Gein, who committed his crimes. Gein inspired other films like Psycho, which we previously discussed, and The Silence of the Lambs, which I don't think quite falls under the umbrella of what we're doing here.
Yeah,
because then I might be inclined to like
technically.
I might be inclined to float like something like Manhunter, which was a pre-Hopkins adaptation of a Hannibal story. Anyway, during development, Hooper used the working title Head Cheese and Leatherface. Hooper cited the changes in culture and political landscape as a central influences on the film. And as we talked about, like Watergate, the oil crisis, Vietnam War, multiple in our news roundup, multiple murders. Like I get where he's coming from on that one. And as you hinted at earlier, the idea of using the chainsaw as the murder weapon came to Hooper while he was in a hardware section of a busy store, contemplating how to speed his way through the crowd. Some intrusive thoughts.
I mean, that's one way to do it, I guess.
Production manager Ron Bozeman told most of the cast and crew that he would have to defer part of their salaries until after it was sold to a distributor. Vortex, their company that made it, Vortex made the idea more attractive by awarding them a share of its potential profits, ranging from 0.25 to 6%, similar to mortgage points. What the cast and crew was not informed of was that Vortex only owned 50% of the rights of the film. To get it financed, they sold off 50%. So that 6% to 0.25%. is more like 3% or you know
0.125
exactly
or
whatever. Yeah. Which means the points were half of the assumed value. Many of the cast members at the time were relatively unknown actors. Icelandic American actor Gunnar Hansen was selected for the role of Leatherface. He regarded Leatherface as having an intellectual disability and having never learned to speak properly. To research his character in preparation for his role, Hansen visited special needs schools and watched how the students moved and spoke. I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm just relaying to you the information.
Listen, 1974, it was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I don't need to editorialize on the rightness or wrongness of that. I'm just letting you know what happened. So the opening narration was performed by John Larroquette, who people may know from Night Court, or might not know, but I know him from Night Court. He performed the narration in the opening credits, for which he was paid in marijuana.
That sounds very on point and on brand for 1974.
Yep. Hansen later recalled, it was 95, 100 degrees every day during filming. They wouldn't wash my costume because they were worried that the laundry might lose it or that it would change color. They didn't have enough money for a second costume, so I wore that mask 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for a month. That's some
Lord.
Unintentional method acting right there is what that is.
That's just straight up nasty.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Not nice. These special effects were simple and limited by the budget. The on-screen blood was real in some cases. Such as the scene in which Leatherface feeds Grandpa. The crew had difficulty getting the stage blood to come out of its tube, so instead Burns' index finger was cut with a razor. Burns' costume was so drenched in blood with stage blood that it was virtually solid by the last day of shooting. After telling Vale, so this is during the scene, I think it's the actor that played Kirk. Yeah, William Vale had expressed concerns about the scene where he's supposed to get hit in the head with a hammer. Oh no, he's concerned about the chainsaw. Sorry. After telling Vale to stay still lest he really be killed, Hansen brought the running chainsaw within 3 inches of Vale's face. No.
New ball game. Can you imagine doing that shit in 2024? You would have to move to Antarctica.
Yeah, and
You'd
also
never be allowed near a camera.
And also, like watching that scene, like you didn't need to do that. You didn't need to pull it that close.
We get it.
Yeah,
we get it.
Yeah.
You sold it.
The shoot was quite dangerous, with Hooper noting that at the wrap party that all cast members had obtained some level of injury. He stated that everyone hated me by the end of production, and it just took years for them to kind of cool off. Yeah, man. Yeah, that's not. Don't do that, gang. Don't make movies that way, gang.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? And it's an interesting conversation to have, right? Because it's 50 years ago. It's a whole different ballgame in Hollywood. And I'm not saying that those things were more acceptable, but those things were definitely more expected.
Yeah.
Which sucks, it's a bummer that that's the way it operated, but really that's how it was. And of course, not every director was like that. Mm-hmm. You hear plenty of stories, we'll get into Halloween. You hear plenty of people talking about John Carpenter and Deborah Hill who were very, very meticulous, but we were never sacrificing people's sanity to make a movie.
Yeah.
It was always very calculated, and they wanted precision, but at the same time, they wanted to have fun. But I feel like you can tell from this movie too, just from the minute that it gets rolling, that this is it's a low budget, it's a shoestring budget, made for like peanuts, and it's one guy running around with a 16 millimeter camera, very much documentary style, which Tobe Hooper at that time was very well versed in. Yeah. And it's really, it just feels like it's 6 people. And nowadays it'd be 6 of your buddies going out to the desert to make a movie. Yeah. But back then it was, 6 professional hopefuls, actor hopefuls who wanted to break into the industry, hoping that like this B movie really gets them somewhere. And I mean, it does in history. Obviously, career-wise, I'm not sure exactly like how well it does for everybody, but you can definitely tell that it looks like one of those sets where you're like, this is just cobbled together with like whatever they could find, and it probably was hectic and chaotic. And thank God it's only 5 actors and 1 killer, plus or minus a few more people. Yeah. Because anything bigger than that, I think that like people would have, if they didn't already, they probably would have torn their hair out and then killed everyone around them.
Yeah. Like you said, it's different in people's expectations of how that. And you could still, if you're in Texas, not doing a union shoot, just getting your buddies together, you could probably still do something like this. Just don't, man. Like for every time, like thank God the story behind this isn't somebody died or whatever. Like that's
seriously, because it definitely has the origins or the makings of one of those. Stories.
Yeah. They're just lucky they dodged that bullet. We open the movie with the opening narration by John Larroquette, which reads as follows. The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin. I'm going to revisit that later. It is all the more tragic in that they were young, but had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And right off the bat, my inner editor was like, you could trim that down. You could tighten that up. You could tighten that up.
Well, it's funny because I hadn't seen the movie in so long. I forgot that was in there.
Yeah, that it even existed. Same. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely forgot. And then it's because I know that it's in the 2003 remake, either the remake or in the trailer, they have something like that.
Yeah.
And so like I remember it from my collective memory, but I forgot that it's like literally in the opening shot of the movie or the beginning part of the movie. And I'm sitting there and I'm going like, oh, okay, if I'm sitting in a movie theater in 1974 and that comes up, I'm immediately kind of scared about what I'm going to see.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to, the opening montage of photographs and you're like, okay, this is actually set up pretty damn well. But, I did not know that Tobe Hooper did documentary filmmaking. But now that you've told me that and I'm rewatching or like reliving the movie in my head, I'm thinking, oh, okay. I totally see where all of this comes into play in this film.
Yeah, all those instincts. And it's one of those, this is at a time where you could get away with being like, this is true. And then, you know what, you could probably do it today. You would just have to work social media in a specific way to make it happen. And I think I feel like the zenith of this type of horror storytelling has to be Blair Witch.
Yeah, I think so too.
Where that viral, because just after Blair Witch, you can't really get away with it in the same way because you could look stuff up. You could be like, hey, is this true? And then find out, no, it's not. No, this didn't happen. Here's something that I think the very next thing I think is way more effective. It's these flashbulb shots of extreme close-ups of mutilated corpses. And it really does a good job of like, wait, what am I seeing? And it's just unsettling. Even now, it's like unsettling, kind of upsetting. It gives you the sense of, interestingly, even though this is not the aftermath of what we're going to see, it gives you the feeling of you're seeing this in the past tense. There's nothing you can do to prevent the horror that is about to unfold. I think it works. I think it's pretty effective. It also, and as we end up seeing that this mutilated corpse is on a grave, we find out that through news narration that is going on at the same time, that a bunch of graves have been exhumed. And of course, having looked at the behind the scenes stuff, knowing that this was informed by, all the stuff that was going on, you can see at the beginnings of like, hey, the humans are the real monsters out there.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that goes straight into the credits, the news, and it starts going off from the graveyard crime to other stuff, and it just gives you, again, it helps put you down into the reality of this movie, the reality that this movie is trying to set up for.
Yeah, and I think that does it really, really well, because I think if you're trying to sell the movie as like quote unquote real, that's the first thing you really need to do. You need to pull audiences in and make it feel like it is a real situation, a real scenario. Yeah. Not necessarily like a documentary or anything, but it's got to feel like it's a real lived-in, existing world. And, in 74, it's a lot easier in a lot of ways to do that, but it just does it. I think just the lo-fi-ness of the movie itself, it really, really sells that too. And yeah, just the setting and the atmosphere. There's just something like unsettling about the very opening of the film.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're in 1974 and you have the context of what's happening in that year kind of behind you, then I think it's easier to kind of buy into what the movie's trying to sell you or the feeling it's trying to sell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we cut to a shot of a roadkill. It's an armadillo on the road as a van drives past. Inside the van are our protagonists, a group of people whose names I will have trouble remembering. Especially, wait, who's that? That's Kirk. All right. Anyway, whatever. We'll get into it. I don't have names for them until deeper in the movie of my notes. We'll see if I'm able to pull them out later.
I can give it to you right now if you want.
Yeah, hit me with them.
Our main character is Sally.
Yes.
Then we've got Jerry,
Yeah.
Franklin,
Yes.
Kirk, and Pam.
Yeah. The other confusing thing about Franklin is I think they say they're going to the Franklin house, his like family home. So now I don't know, is Franklin his last name? That whatever. Doesn't matter.
In the movie he's credited as Franklin Hardesty, and Sally is
Hardesty.
Sally Hardesty.
He's the quote unquote invalid brother. Which watching the movie, I'm like, what? Do you mean because he uses a wheelchair? Is that what we're?
I know. Again, whole new world. Like 1974. I'm like, well, but the one thing that I did tell my girlfriend as we were watching, I clocked it. I was like, I don't know if it's because he's in a wheelchair or like what exactly they're trying to say about this character, if anything, if it was just like an actor's choice. But for some reason, he's so babyish.
Yeah.
He feels like a 10-year-old stuck in like a 20-something-year-old's body.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what choice was that? Like, who made that choice? Why was that choice made? Just the combination of those things, I'm like, oh my God, it is so Wild West. Like they could not give a damn about what people would think about this movie in 50 years, what they would say about how the character's labeled, the choices that he makes as a character. And you're like, I guess, like I feel like now we're definitely more conscious of those things. Not to say that, where people are asking themselves, well, what are they going to say in 40 years about this? But I think in the now, we're very obviously much more conscious of how we label things.
Exactly. So we've got our group. They're in a van. They go to let the Franklin go pee. And the slasher movies, horror movies love this stuff where like just random bad bullshit
shenanigans
befalls somebody just to get in. This is like the closest we get to like a jump scare where like, oh, he's falling, just so you're not, it's to create a sense of unease immediately. But he dude just falls down a hill. That's it. It doesn't matter to the rest of the movie. It doesn't feed into anything.
He pees himself and then falls.
We've all been there. So they are heading to the graveyard to see if a grandparent, I believe is the Hardesty grandfather, has been exhumed. I think they determined that he is not. They stop by they pass a slaughterhouse, and as they pass the slaughterhouse, they pick up a random weirdo hitchhiking, which they shouldn't have done. They shouldn't have done
another very 70s thing that I looked at my girlfriend. I was like, nobody's doing that today.
Nope.
And it's really weird that they did it back then because you clearly, as the movie shows us, you never know.
Well, and I wonder how much of that is like, because I grew up like, you would never pick up a hitchhiker. And I wonder how like often it's actually fine, but like we've seen so many movies. The movies have vilified the act of hitchhiking so much that it's.
I'm not rolling the dice on it. I just couldn't.
Well, and thankfully, I think we're kind of in a time where you don't really need to with like.
No, I feel like no. I feel like the only reason anyone would hitchhike is if their car is like stuck on the side of the road, they run out of gas, and they're close enough to a gas station that they just want to go fill up their gas tank or fill up their like gas container.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like everyone's using their phone to call their insurance company to get a tow truck, I feel like.
Yeah, as long as you've got signal. I will say, have you spent any time in Texas?
Absolutely. Well, that's not true. I went once to Austin.
Okay. Yeah. Austin's great. When I first came to move out here, I drove with my friend from Florida to California, and we were going to stop at it was his friend's place, to stay in Texas. And I made the mistake of, like, I'm used to, like, where I lived in Florida, where, there's pretty much an exit every few miles, and you can get a gas station. It's not a big deal. It's very similar to LA. So I'm running a little, like I'm at about a quarter tank on gas. There's a gas station, but I got a quarter tank. I'm good to go. And then it gets dark. And like by dark, I mean, there's not street lights. I mean, dark. I mean, pitch black. Everything beyond my headlights is just darkness. And there's not an exit. And there's not an exit. And there's not an exit. And it's like, God damn it. I should have gotten gas. I should have fucking gotten gas. And suddenly like Texas Chainsaw is playing in my brain or whatever. And it ended up being fine. I ended up getting gas. And I ended up being fine. But it is one of those like, all right, well, maybe in this scenario, you know what I mean? Maybe you would hitchhike because, like, who knows how far out you are? Who knows about signal? All that stuff. But you know, Texas is a lot of state, and there's sections of that state where there's a lot of nothing.
Yeah, that's very true. I never considered that truthfully, and I would imagine that even though, considering what year it is, like that still probably is a lot of the case for a lot of those middle America countries.
Yeah.
It's town, road, town, road, town, road, and then road and literally nothing for, let's say, 50, 60 miles.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that like a gas station in the middle of nowhere is far and few between.
Yeah.
Like we are very lucky where we live in Southern California that there's a gas station. I feel like every 5 miles there's a gas station. Like if you get to a point where there's no gas station, you're probably driving through Camp Pendleton because it's a base and you're not going to be able to pull off there to get gas. Other than that, I don't know. Like I feel like there's a gas station like a stone's throw away from each other. So yeah, I totally get that. In Texas, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, Texas is a little bit dicier. So they pick up this hitchhiker, and he's immediately a weirdo. They're talking about, because they passed the slaughterhouse, they've been debating what's better, he says using a sledgehammer. Franklin's talking about the little No Country for Old Men bolt gun thing. This is where we get the explanation of the hitchhiker explains what head cheese is, which it sounds really gross. And the hitchhiker takes the knife from Franklin. Franklin's got a knife that he's picking his nails with. Hitchhiker takes it, proceeds to cut his own hand with it. Then I think he gives it back to Franklin. He pretends to take a picture. No, he does take a picture. And then he tries to sell it to them for $2. They won't. So he like blows it up with gunpowder. Like he sets it on foil.
So crazy.
And what
chaos. Absolute chaos.
Say what you gonna say.
Well, I was gonna say just absolute chaos in like the smallest little van.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's one of those things where it's like, the second he starts cutting himself, I'm pulling to the side of. That's the thing that's like, I wouldn't pick up a hitchhiker to begin with, but once this is happening, you're out. We're done. I'm not driving anymore. We're out. We're getting you out of the van. Like I don't care what happens.
I'm literally doing everything I can to yeet you out of that vehicle.
We're done. You get to keep the knife. Have it. It's all yours, my man. But yeah, so he blows up the picture, and then he has like what looks to be like a straight razor, like something you would used to shave with in like the 30s or whatever. And then he cuts Franklin with
the 30s. People still use those things now. DJ, come on.
Not me, man. Not me. Look at this. Not me, man. I'm not using a straight razor. With a straight razor?
No.
Yeah. See, you're right. People still use it, but it's like, why, man? That seems like a hazard. But anyway, he's got an old rusty straight razor. I hope Franklin has his tetanus shot because he gives him a nice little cut. And this is when everybody freaks out and they get him out of the van, and he smears blood on the side of the van.
Chaos.
Yeah, which people will wonder if that's a sign. They wonder if the movie that's a sign. And I think what we learned is no, that seems to be unrelated to everything that happens after.
And that to me is actually like one of the funnier parts of the movie. I was like waiting. Oh, the car's marked.
Yeah.
It's marked. People are gonna know.
Yeah,
they're gonna know. Oh, he left blood on the side of the car.
Yeah.
And that was about it.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
He even wonders out loud, like, dude, are they following us or whatever? Turns out, like, that's not. They just go to a house right by the murder house.
Yeah. So funny.
So they end up going to a gas station without gas. It does, however, has a sign that says, "We slaughter barbecue." Which is something. It sure is something. They get barbecue from this. Dude, could you imagine getting fucking barbecue from a middle of nowhere gas station?
And then biting into it and realizing, this might be someone's intestines.
This might be human. Anyway. They can't. I was a little confused by this. They need a gas station. I think they're told the gas station's back that way, and it looks like they go back that way, but nothing. Then they just end up at the house that I think they were going to begin with. So I was a little, and they don't have gas.
Right.
Okay.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess they just decided to finish their journey. What was the sister's name? Sally.
Yeah.
Sally asks, because I just have her in my notes, blonde girl. Blonde girl asks, dude, this was the part, like, beyond the roadside gas barbecue being gross, Franklin's dicking around with the knife that Hitchhiker cut himself with. Earlier, he's like, wait, do you think that's blood? That's blood from that guy. That's right. That's crazy.
What do you think it is?
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
You saw him use it. What are you talking about? Then his sister's like, hey, can I use the knife? He wipes the knife on his sweaty shirt, hands it to her, and she uses it to cut the food they're eating.
It's the worst.
What the fuck?
Gross. It's so gross. I'm like, people literally had no clue.
They had but they didn't even think, the idea of bloodborne pathogens didn't even occur to them in 1974.
Yep. You just like, I was watching that, and I think the face I made was this.
Oh no! Because that's the thing. For people that are just listening to us talk about it and haven't watched the movie, one, what are you doing? Watch the movie. But you might think that this is an intentional thing that the movie's doing to up the uncomfortability. It is not treated that way. It's like, oh yeah, just hand over the. I mean, well, who cares?
Yeah, it's basically just like, oh yeah, just put some Windex on it. It'll be all right.
It'll be
like,
fine.
Oh my God, it's someone else's blood. Yeah. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they've been. You don't know what they have. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, you throw that knife away, man. You throw it away. It's not even that good looking a knife. You throw it away.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so they arrive at this abandoned house that I guess Franklin like grew up in or whatever, or visited when he was a kid. And man, Franklin's having a hard time. Not only is he falling down a hill, not only has he got his arm cut, all the other teenagers, however old they are, abandon them to giggle upstairs while he's like struggling to like get up the front of the house.
The whole time that scene, and he's just like, he's just full on panicking.
Yeah.
But I'm watching that, I'm going like, this is, first of all, the rest of the group is just the worst people.
Yeah.
You have someone who's in a wheelchair, and it's nothing but like roots and branches and just a bunch of shit on the floor.
Yeah.
Not one person thought, oh, maybe we should help him get inside the house. Then he gets inside the house, and the whole thing is in shambles, and I'm like, where are you wheeling around to?
Yeah.
There's nowhere for you to go. You would be sleeping like in the chair on the bottom floor living room because you're not getting into a bedroom upstairs. Like, no one's pulling you up there.
Yeah,
no one gives a shit about you.
Yeah.
You're screwed. You should have just stayed home. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's one of those things, man, where it's like, I feel bad because clearly Franklin's got nothing better to do. Because why these four kids are just going to start fucking each other upstairs, and you're just going to be downstairs listening, man? That's not a good weekend. Like, what are you thinking?
There's nothing to see. There's nothing to eat. Nothing to drink. What are you fucking doing?
What is the plan here, Franklin? But it also starts a tradition I think we'll see in a lot of these slashers where it's like, what if all these kids were the worst? What if they were the worst?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, what if you were literally, if you were to look up in the dictionary, like, worst person ever, it would be a picture of literally every teen in every slasher movie because they're all terrible.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this one, though, is I feel like later slashers, and we'll keep track of this, I feel like later slashers do that intentionally because there's a sense that it's supposed to be fun. And so if you like the character too much, then it becomes less fun and it leads into more of the horror aspect of it. This one feels like it's almost doing it unintentionally. Like they just don't give a shit about Franklin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely the sense that I get from the movie is very much like, they brought him as an obligation, not because they wanted to. And, you know, I wouldn't say that the movie explicitly says it, but I think putting that character in a wheelchair, it's definitely driving the point home of like, this character is more of a burden than someone that we want around us, because
Yeah.
they ditch him every time, every moment that they get.
Every second
they
they
go
can.
upstairs, they go to the, they try to go to the pond or whatever. Like, he's bailed on in every moment possible.
Yeah. And I think if I wanted to be generous, I don't feel like this, maybe I'm underestimating it. I don't feel like this movie runs this deep, but you could make an argument that underscores the themes about man's cruelty to man. Like, even, we're looking at a spectrum here. On the one end, obviously you've got the people eating other people, but even then the casual cruelty of the people that Franklin are with, they just don't care about their fellow man.
Yeah.
And I think that works thematically. Maybe I'm underestimating the movie. Maybe that was an intentional choice on their part. It just feels like what it felt more like to me is we like having a vulnerable character. We want somebody that can't easily escape, that we feel bad for. Oh, and not even not even in a completely sympathetic way. Just like, anyway. So it's Pam and Kirk decide they want to go to, there's apparently a swimming spot down the path. And as they're on the way to the swimming spot, they hear what sounds like a generator and they see a house. And they're like, we can go to this house to get gas. And at first they discover a bunch of cars, covered up cars.
Immediate red flag.
Yeah. I guess if people are looking down at the house from the air, I don't know. Anyway, because it's not just a tarp. It's like almost like I don't know what
it's
you
like
would
netting.
call this. It's like netting. It's like if you've seen like the ghillie suits that like snipers wear that blend them in.
Yep.
It's kind of like that to make it look like if you're looking at it from above, it would just blend in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirk goes and asks for gas while Pam waits outside. And I'm going to be honest with you. For watching this movie again, I was feeling like it's kind of dragging a little bit. Like, wow, we'd spent a lot of time with these kids on the road. And so I forgot how abrupt, like once Leatherface is on the scene, like Kirk goes in the house, looks in a room, gets a hammer to the head, is dragged into a room, and a metal door slammed behind him. And you're like, oh, fuck. Oh, my God.
I forgot about that too. Like, leading up to that point, I agree. I was waiting for something to happen. I kept thinking to myself, man, does this movie really take this long to get rolling? Like, At what point are we going to like start getting into it? And then that moment hits. First of all, just him in, hello? Anybody home? Anybody home? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Is anybody here? I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Either give up, knock one more time and ask, and if no one answers, clearly there is no one there. Go back.
Yeah. Go.
But then that moment happens with Leatherface, and I was like, shit, this is really abrupt and it's brutal. It still looks pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And like the cherry on top for me was slamming that door shut. I forgot that there's like that whole other entryway. And that, for whatever reason, that hit and it kind of holds on that shot for a beat. And you're like, oh, okay, we're in the movie now. All right, cool. It's unhinged. Here we go.
And when Kirk hits
We're
the ground,
starting.
he's like flailing and stuff like that. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that metal... there's some interesting, it feels like there's some interesting intentionality there, because once that metal, that I hadn't really thought about, once that metal door slams, it really like evokes the feeling of you're now in a trap. You've now fallen into a trap.
Absolutely.
It's really like, even we've both watched it before, but it lulls you into like, yeah, man, wow, we're really taking our time. And then once shit starts happening, you're like, oh my God.
It never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops for the next like 45, 50 minutes.
Yeah. So then we get the iconic Pam walking in, low angle, shorts shot. They know what they're doing. And
they know.
They know.
In every way, shape, and form what they're doing.
Oh, they know. And Pam stumbles into what I can only describe as a bone room. There's a room with a chicken in a cage, and then it's got bone furniture and all that stuff. It's
feathers everywhere.
Yeah. Why is the chicken in the cage? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What is going on in the bone room? What do you do in the bone room?
It's unhinged, DJ. That's all that matters.
And so as she runs out of the bone room, this whole sequence is pretty iconic because she's about almost out the door when Leatherface grabs her, pulls her back in, and then takes her and places her on a meat hook. Ooh.
Good Lord. It's so great because I feel like it's just one long shot going through that, and then just the hook, and you're like, Good Lord, this is as unhinged as I remember it. I didn't make this up in my head. It really is unhinged, and he just hangs her there and just goes to town.
And what's funny is apparently they tried to cut around the gore because Tobe Hooper wanted a PG rating. For those that don't know, in '74 there wasn't a PG-13.
Oh my God!
So they were shooting for a PG, which they didn't get. They didn't.
Can you imagine if 50 years later we'd be talking about this movie like, yeah, and it's like the only PG slasher movie?
Yes.
Jesus.
It would be insane. And of course you're not going to get, because I think about, stuff like this. You do this now, maybe a little bit bloodier. And obviously you compare it to Psycho, where it's like, we've come so far in the 14 years since that movie and what we're allowed to depict in a film. But stuff, even then, like, so after this, he's gonna chainsaw Kirk in front of Pam. I think there is a little bit of blood splatter, but
there might be, but it's pretty minimal for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that, really quick, I think I so much appreciate about these older films is because the budgets are so small and they don't necessarily have the money to like build a prop of a person that they're going to cut up and they're going to put a bunch of fake blood in it. It's going to squirt everywhere.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it cuts around those things and it just gives you a little blood, a little something just to really sell like, oh yeah, his head just came off, or whatever the case may be. I appreciate that a lot. I think that with a lot of the remakes too, because these movies are remade like 18 times.
Yep.
It loses that and it gets gorier and bloodier and more sadistic, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But there's something charming about not seeing what's happening, but in your brain you're filling in the blanks and you're going, that fool's head is getting sawed off right now.
Yep.
Yikes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then Jerry goes to look for Kirk and Pam. He also finds the house. This is where I have in my notes where it's like, oh, it really didn't have anything to do with the mark, did it? The house they were going to happens to be within walking distance of the murder house. Okay, sure, all right. Jerry he wanders in the house. Everybody's so chill just wandering in this people's house.
Oh my God, what is wrong with people? Stop opening people's doors and going in.
They might be murderers. Jerry hears a sound and he opens a meat locker. Pam is in. It's like one of those like old... what would you call that?
This is a freezer box.
Freezer box. Yeah, thank you. And Pam's in there. She flips out, and then Jerry is grabbed and hammered by Leatherface. I was a little confused here because he gets hammered by Leatherface. Leatherface goes to put Pam back in the box, and then he comes back and he looks freaked out. And my brain interpreted that as Jerry got away. We never touched back in on Jerry, so I had to look up online what happened to Jerry. And I've been informed, what the internet informed me of, he was looking panicked because all these people showing up. He didn't lose. That is when Jerry died. He didn't lose Jerry.
Got it. So he goes out looking out the window because he's now freaked out, thinking like, "Oh, is there more people outside? Like, what's happening? Where
what people are saying?"
From? That's also that I was also kind of confused by that because I remember the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But because I hadn't seen it in so long, I was thinking like, "Oh, was Jerry the guy in the truck that ends up picking up Sally?" I was trying to like figure out like,
that would have
what
made
happens
sense
to him. Yeah, that would have made sense.
Things go off the rails. So. There's two guys just driving down the highway that have insane stories to share at the end of the day. oh my God.
It is so crazy.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, darkness has fallen, and Sally and Franklin are flipping the fuck out. This is one of those. This movie is a classic. It set up a lot of tropes of the movies we're going to watch in the future. But there are moments where it's like, yeah, this is indie movie shit where two people are screaming at each other for seemingly no. What? How did they?
No. And I'm like, I'm watching this movie. I'm going like, oh my God. Please just shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Just figure it out, please. My God.
Because there's no escalation. It's like immediately we don't know where our friends are, and we are flipping out. We are screaming at each other, and it's like. Take a breath, everybody. Like,
someone breathe. No. Someone have a drink of water or something because it's too much.
They're fighting over the flashlight. It turns out, I guess the keys is either with like Kirk or Jerry.
Change the keys. Yeah, no, I'm not giving you the flashlight. I was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna reach my hand into the projector screen and slap you both.
Take a breath.
Stop it.
And also leave. Just leave. I don't care that they don't have to just leave.
I don't care what you do. Just get out of there.
You're not finding Jerry or Kirk or Pam. They're done for it. Sally decides to go look for Jerry, and Franklin doesn't want her to go alone. And this is where I have in my notes, I don't feel like Jerry's worth it. Jerry didn't strike me as somebody that was worth going looking for like this.
if you all have a license, or
Yeah.
at least if Sally has a license and can drive, that's all you need. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Push the car to the bottom of the hill and get out of there. I don't know. What to
Yeah,
tell
you're
you.
not going to be sticking a year from now. If everything worked out, you weren't going to be with Jerry a year from now. So I don't know that he's worth all this effort. And so they're going through the trees and the tall grass. And then suddenly that Pokemon music starts playing because they stumble into a wild Leatherface. Do, 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 do. And he immediately chainsaw. Poor fucking Franklin. Immediately. Chainsaw to the face.
Franklin had no chance. The minute that the movie opens and you see Franklin, you're like, which, to the movie's credit, he's the second to last person to die. At least on like the good group side.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the movie and it starts, I'm going, well, he's dying first for sure.
Yeah.
This movie's not giving him any options to getting out of this movie. Surprisingly, second to last. I was like, all right, cool. I'm into this. But yeah, so now, I guess now it makes sense to me that Leatherface is freaking out that there's other people because he goes outside of the house to seek out other people.
Yeah.
I guess if Jerry would have escaped, he'd also go out of the house
look
to
for
try to find
Jerry.
So I know either way, I guess it works just fine. But yeah, okay, it makes sense then.
And that's a weird plot. Like that. Pick that up for 2. Jerry escaped. Jerry got out.
That's actually the title of the second movie. Jerry got out.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Jerry got out. What's Jerry up to? Where is he at? Oh my God. So poor Franklin gets chainsawed to death. And then we've got like 20 minutes of Leatherface chasing Sally all over through the house, through the woods. I have my notes. I bet Sally wished she wore a bra today. I bet
God. Oh my God. So funny. But seriously, the running, I'm like, yo, they must be able to do a mile in under 6 minutes, like 5 minutes flat, because holy God, they are running so much and within inches. Yeah. And then it cuts to the next shot and they're like feet away from each other. And I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, all right, well, we'll take it.
We'll let it slide. And also, I guess the barbecue joint was literally like the equivalent of a block away from the murder house.
Basically.
Yeah. Maybe, as the crow flies, they're running through the woods, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so she's running all over. She's like, as she runs into the house, she runs into Grandma and Grandpa, who look like these desiccated corpses. And here's my favorite bit. I don't want to miss this. So she runs upstairs, classic. Runs upstairs, and this is where she runs into Grandma and Grandpa.
Oh my God, I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Runs downstairs. This is how you make an icon, gang. Leatherface runs in, a mountain of a man with his chainsaw. Sally sees him, freaks out, screams, and startles Leatherface. He's like, oh shit. And then he's like, wait a second. And then he chases her, and it's like, that's why people love Leatherface. That shit. Because he's just a dude. He's just a guy.
Oh my God. Not only that, instead of just turning the knob on his own house door, he chainsaws through the fucking thing.
Dude.
And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. He eats through the door, which from a filmmaking perspective is really smart because you know that you don't have the budget to do full on chainsawing through people, but you can chainsaw through a fucking door because you want to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You want to see shit get massacred with a chainsaw. My favorite part of that though, because I have in my notes like, dude, it's your door. It's your door. And everybody's been walking into this house. Yeah. It's your door.
All of a sudden you can't just turn the handle. Well, the door's broken. What's happening here? Yeah. What are we doing? What are we doing? You've been running a chainsaw for the last 10 minutes. Come on, man.
But the best part about that is Dad, the barbecue guy, comments on it later. He's like, look what you did to the door.
You big idiot. What did you do to the door? And I'm like, that's great. I love this. I love it.
Great. So then she goes up and she like runs out of, this will not be the last time she runs out through a window in this movie. She jumps out a second story window. And then more running through the woods. And this is where they end up back at the gas station. And she's freaking out around gas station guy who's just immediately sketch as fuck. He goes to get his truck, leaving the door wide open, by the way. If I was Sally, I'd be like, close that fucking door, man. close the door to the shack.
Not to mention that Leatherface was like within 12 feet of her.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden disappears?
Yeah.
Not us. I don't know.
And while she's waiting for them to bring the truck around, she's like eyeing the barbecue as it's cooking, and she's not doing so hot. Maybe you could infer that she kind
Now
of.
there's the barbecue, truthfully.
Yeah. True. Gas station guy comes back with a truck and is immediately trying to abduct her. Like he's got like a burlap bag and like rope.
And rope, what are you doing? Well, honey, this is good for you. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, hell no.
He puts a bloody rag in her mouth, which I think would be grosser if I hadn't seen her use a bloody knife to cut food earlier.
True.
Yeah. On the way back to the house, barbecue guy runs into hitchhiker, and which we learn as he's kind of yelling at him, we learn all that graveyard bullshit was apparently hitchhiker's doing, goofing around. And then he calls hitchhiker Leatherface's brother. So we kind of infer a family dynamic here. Barbecue guy's
It's
dad.
and two kids. Yeah. Also, really quick, I just need to point out that he smacked the shit out of her with a broom. And she had
Oh
a
my
knife in her
God.
hand.
Yeah. That whole
What
thing.
are we doing here? Come on. The whole time he's driving up to the house, he's just like,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this movie is absolutely bonkers.
It's bonkers. That's exactly the word for it. So, yeah, Dad flips out about the chainsaw door, and then we see Leatherface is wearing a new face, this time an old woman, which I wonder what kind of work he has to do to keep the faces in that kind of condition. I don't think the face comes off that way.
Ugh. Ugh. Disgusting. But I think also the thing that we like really learn about Leatherface, because up to this point, I'm watching the movie and I've seen it before, but even a first-time viewer watches the movie, they're like, Leatherface is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
The minute Dad shows up, Leatherface is like pretty scared.
Yeah.
A little intimidated by his father, and he really like changes your perception of not only that family but of Leatherface too, and that's different. That's a little unique. I feel like we don't see that too often in some of these horror films. Like you get little flashes of it in things like Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
But that's Jason admiring his dead mother.
Yeah.
In this it's like it's admiring a living, breathing parent that you're intimidated by who has control over you. And Leatherface is enormous.
Yeah.
Enormous.
I think that's too, as an icon, I think that's to Leatherface's detriment because, you look at not detriment. It is to his benefit. That's the opposite of detriment. It is to his benefit, because when you think about, once we talk about Halloween, we're talking about Michael Myers. Obviously, the point of Michael Myers is his inhumanity, is that he has almost become something beyond human, is the implication. I think it's easier to attach when you see that Leatherface has these vulnerabilities in that he is childlike and he may not entirely understand what he's doing. That makes it, it's weird to say, but that makes it easier to root for him as a character. And as we get into these slasher movies, that'll matter more and more, that you do kind of want to root for that combination of semi-sympathetic slasher and asshole teenagers. That alchemical mix is part of what the formula is, what makes the genre appealing. Because it's in the context of these movies, you want to see these characters die, and you want to see it's kind of like, to take it back to more of our normal wheelhouse. Whenever you're watching a show like Daredevil or whatever, and everybody around Daredevil is like, you should stop being Daredevil. It's like, shut up. I'm watching the show for Daredevil. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Quit trying to discourage him, you idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. So they, Leatherface is wearing old woman face. I do feel like this is an homage to Psycho a little bit, a little bit of the cross-dressing element of,
I agree,
of Leatherface. And I think it mostly works in that it's just him wearing a coterie of faces and not full on. I don't know that we're supposed to infer this is full on cross-dressing, which would make me a little bit more uncomfortable because it further stigmatizes, perhaps transness or whatever. It's not really there. It's just a face he has on. So they bring Grandpa downstairs, much more willing to move that wheelchair than they were for Franklin. Franklin's friends were for Franklin. This is where we get the scene I mentioned earlier in the behind the scenes where they feed Grandpa. And Grandpa does a little dance. He does a little wheelchair dance. And apparently they fed him real blood, which is, again, like, guys.
Jesus Christ. What are we doing here, people? My God.
Oh, my God. In the 80s, guys, there's going to be this thing called the AIDS crisis, all right? You need bloodborne pathogens, man. Don't mess around with that shit.
God. You wouldn't even do that. You wouldn't even do that on a shoestring budget movie today. Like,
no.
It would never even cross your mind. You would not dare, unless you're absolutely unhinged.
Dude,
you would never dare to even in your brain go, well, what if we just use real blood?
No, never, ever, ever. You'd be sued into the ground to suggest something like that because you're risking the health of your cast and crew. The closest thing we get to that now is something like in Django Unchained, where like Leonardo DiCaprio cuts his hand and then acts through the scene, and it's like he's actually bleeding there. That's it.
Yeah,
that's as far as you go. Oh my God. Anyway, so they feed Grandpa. It's like a vampire. It brings him back to life. Sally Black. This is where we get Sally's just screaming. She's been screaming because she's being chased, but like. Anyway, she blacks out and she wakes up at the dinner table with dad and brother and Leatherface, and she starts screaming some more, and they start like making sounds at her. And again, it goes on a little bit long, but it is effective in that, like, yeah, this is upsetting. This is upsetting. This is an upsetting situation we're in.
Yeah, totally. And I agree. I think it goes on for a little too long, but I think it goes into a place of discomfort, and I feel like that's the point of the movie. I think just as the viewer, though, you're like, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
It's unhinged.
Yeah.
I understand. I get it.
Yeah.
You've sold me. Move on. I'm uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
I feel weird. I don't want to look at the screen. I want to look away. I want to take a drink of my popcorn, but even that feels uncomfortable. You know, it's like it just escalates to the point where you just don't even want to look at the screen anymore, and you want to plug your ears.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you get to that point, I think the movie almost realizes it and then goes, great, let's move to the next like bit. And then the screaming just continues. And you're like, okay, never mind.
Yeah. So they decide that what we learn, interestingly, Hitchhiker kind of makes fun of Dad because he's saying him and Leatherface do all the work and Dad just cooks the food. So, and Dad admits to being uncomfortable with the murder aspect of this whole thing. And what they end up deciding is, credit to this movie, because I thought where we were going to go, and I think this way because I think one of the remakes does this, that I thought it was going to be like, we're going to keep Sally around because we need a mom or something like that. And I'm like, I'm glad we're not doing that. I'm glad we're not playing around with that.
Yeah, I feel like 1974. They were like, nah, we just want something to quote unquote play with.
Yeah. So they decide they're going to let. This is unhinged. We're going to let Grandpa kill her because apparently he's the best at it. But I hate to break it to him. Grandpa's on the decline, and so he's barely able to hold a hammer, let alone wield it.
Have you seen what this man looks like? Have you looked at him closely or from afar?
Yeah.
Because he looks the same, just as bad.
Yeah. So like they start like handing him the hammer, and he drops it onto her head, and they make a gash. The whole thing is just not going great all around. And then Sally is able to escape in all this chaos. And then we get a scene with an obvious stunt double jumping through the window. Like there's a wig and everything. Like it's like, that's a stunt double. That's okay. You didn't think we noticed, but we did.
That's a whopping $25 that we spend on the stunt double.
Yeah. And then she jumps through the window. And she's running away from the house, being chased by a hitchhiker. And actually, like the pacing of this hitchhiker, and they cheat this, by the way. Hitchhiker could totally catch her, but he's running like alligator style. It's like, well, if you did a straight line, you would have got her.
Yeah, absolutely. He's weaving and dodging.
Yeah.
I feel like, and maybe this again was or was not intentional. I have no clue. But I'm like, it's a little bit of a taunt.
Yeah.
A little bit of like, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. And it like to some degrees it works, and some degrees I'm like, let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
It's minute 74. Come on.
Yeah. And then what I do think is effective about it is, he's doing that. He's playing around. And then Leatherface comes out hoofing it with the chainsaw. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And that is so terrifying.
Yeah.
Like for the size that character is.
Yes.
To be able to match your speed. And I get it. She's also injured. So, it works. But to come at you with that chainsaw.
Yeah.
I've been to haunted houses, where they like have those setups.
Yeah.
That's still terrifying in a very controlled environment. If that were to happen in real life, I don't know what I would do. I'd be running and my pants would slowly turn brown in the back. I think that's what would happen.
Yeah. So she runs into the street and she tries to flag down a semi truck to help her, and it runs over hitchhiker, which I was like, yeah, good. Give her to that guy.
So good.
Yeah, give her to that
Very
guy.
nice.
And for the budget, actually, I was actually surprised at how much they show of him getting run over.
Oh, me too. I was like really surprised that we went there. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we couldn't afford to build like dummies of everybody else.
Yeah.
But for this one money shot, we did.
We did. We were ready for that, see that character get run over. And then so she gets into the truck. Actually, I like the sequence quite a bit. She gets in the truck. Leatherface comes in and starts trying to saw the door. Meanwhile, the driver of the truck is like, what the fuck is happening? What did I
Let's get the hell out of here.
Because he stops. That's what happened. He stops because he just ran somebody over, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And then he sees Chainsaw Guy, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And so they get in the truck. Leatherface is trying to chainsaw the door. Truck driver grabs a wrench. They get out the other door. Leatherface is chasing them. Truck driver beams Leatherface in the head with the wrench.
Oh my god, this is, and it's like it's shot almost like a YouTube skit.
Yeah.
Throws it, and it just really quickly cuts to Leatherface for like 4 frames, and you see.
Yeah. Doink. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. You're 100% right. And then like Leatherface falls and the saw hits his leg.
Yeah.
Things have gone off the rails for the Leatherface family. And then he gets up. Truck driver is just running. Meanwhile, another pickup truck is coming. Sally waves that thing down, just climbs into the truck bed, and then I think pickup truck driver quickly is able to at least read the situation enough to be like, I need to get the fuck out of here. I need to not.
He saw a dude with a fucked up face and a chainsaw and went, yeah, we should probably get out of here.
Yeah, saw a guy run in and it's like, I'll figure out girl in my truck bed in a minute. But not here. Not here is where I figure that out.
Girl in truck bed covered in blood from head to toe. Oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, and this is where we get 2 of the most iconic shots from this movie. We get Sally like laugh crying in the back of the truck bed, which is really where I think this underscores that tagline on the poster, like who survives and what's left of them. What is left of Sally's sanity after this situation?
Jesus Christ, nothing. Probably nothing.
And on the flip side of that, and what I thought was interesting before, like I understood, obviously I'm familiar with both these scenes, but what I didn't really appreciate to watching it before is how the ambiguity of both of them. So Sally's laughing because she's free, but it's like an upsetting laugh. It's like maybe you'll never really be free of this. Meanwhile, Leatherface is like dancing with his chainsaw, and it's meant to be he's frustrated that he lost her, but there's almost something balletic. It is also an ambiguous action.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, and it's so interesting to like end on those 2 shots of, like you're saying, she's free but still trapped because she's gone through something that is going to alter her life in ways that like no one can imagine.
Yeah.
And for Leatherface, to have this like very balletic, frustrating, upset, maybe a sense of relief. I don't know.
Yeah. Probably
not. Distraught, like it's all these emotions wrapped up in this weird dance with a chainsaw that I was like, this is so strange, but so kind of beautiful and unhinged, and I don't know exactly how to feel about this, but I'm so intrigued by it. And yeah, it's a really good ending to a movie that was just like escalating and escalating and escalating. And it's the first time you feel like as the viewer you can kind of take a breath after 50 minutes, 45 minutes of just absolute pure chaos.
Yeah.
And I feel like the character kind of feels that as well, but at the same time, like, is having a mental breakdown because I think in that moment she's finally having the realization of what she's just gone through.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it goes from crying to this like maniacal laugh in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's really well done for those final moments.
You know, it's interesting as a fan of like genre movies, it's interesting how horror movies, as opposed to something like the action genre, because a lot of the action movies, the characters will go through stuff that is just as traumatizing, but they like laugh it off and light a cigar and like, we did it. Horror movies allow their characters to have PTSD. Like acknowledge that, like, yeah, this was upsetting. This was this was not a good situation you went through. And it's interesting. Because you want to. It's tricky to end, I think, and I think we'll see this more and more. Finding a good ending for a horror movie is tricky, in that you want to give the audience some sense of closure and catharsis, but you also don't want to be like, everything's okay. You know what I mean? Because that's not what the movie you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially, and I've like helped people write some things and that, but I do think that's true, because I feel like you've spent so much time writing a third act or a finale that is kind of all the eggs in the basket sort of a thing, but now you have to resolve it, and like you're saying, you have to leave the characters somewhere. And if it's a horror, it's probably not the best place. Like, it is a traumatic state, and like, is it an abrupt ending? Are you going to have some sort of like epilogue that, gives some context as to like where they're at or not? I'm always intrigued by movies, especially horror, because I feel like a lot of times horror movies just end. Like the final thing happens, the final girl or final person gets away or doesn't, and then it just ends. And you're like, good goddamn.
Yeah.
Like, you've just kind of like spilled your guts, for lack of a better term. And now I'm just left to sit here to like think about what I just experienced. And in some ways are able to give those characters some kind of closure and finality within like 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And it works for the most part. Like, sometimes you feel unfulfilled, but a lot of times, like, we'll get into some of the other movies, you're like, damn, it's an emotion that the character usually has. And I feel like that emotion really sort of like wraps up and solidifies what the character is about to experience going forward in that fictional world for the next like month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, year, 5 years, 10 years, 40 years. And
absolutely,
it's kind of impressive that horror directors or directors of like any genre have kind of like figure that out, that with an emotion at the end, it's really all it takes. You don't need to like keep going. You can just have an emotion. That's the end of the movie. An audience can sit there and go, I'm fucked. I'm fucked up.
Yeah.
This character must be really fucked up.
One of my knowing when to end your movie is such an important skill, that when it, you feel a movie end at the exact right moment, you're like, oh yeah, you nailed it. That was right. That was perfect. That was the exact right moment. You knew right when to get out. And it can be tricky. It can be a tricky thing. But everybody, that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Adam, do you have any final thoughts on 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Final thoughts are that I still continue to enjoy this movie on rewatches. It had been so long. I wasn't sure how well I knew I would like it, but sometimes you rewatch movies that you haven't seen in a while, and when you watch them younger, younger brain is going like, oh my God, wow, this is like really, really good, really good, really good. And then you get into your mid-30s and you've experienced so much horror and become a little bit maybe desensitized to it, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna feel the same emotions that I felt. Is it as scary as it is the first time? No, because you kind of know already what to expect. But the tension still feels threatening.
Yeah.
I still am kind of like, okay, he's walking through the house. I'm really annoyed at this character. He's gonna get yanked by Leatherface. Yeah. I know it's coming. And then it happens. You're like, God, it still has that really good effect. Yeah. The closing of the door. Like, I'm really like still into it. So I'm glad when I experience older movies like this, particularly horror, that it still really holds up. And I think that just goes back to the simplicity, not trying to overcomplicate, not even overcomplicating the shots themselves. Like, it's just a camera on sticks looking down a hallway, a character closes a door, but it's just that like visceral momentum that moment has that really like makes it feel really uncomfortable. So yeah, it was a really good time rewatching this one.
Absolutely. And where can the kids find what you're working on?
Good question. You can find me on Heroes Reforged. We're doing reactions for shows and movies every single week. We have our Czechskins podcast as well. It's San Diego. Well, at the time of this recording, it will be irrelevant, but I'm about to jump into San Diego Comic-Con. So I don't know what awaits me for the next 4 days. It'll be a really, really fun time. But we're doing all that kind of stuff, reactions and trailers and all kinds of things. So check that out. I'm on Twitter too. It's a little bit of its own Texas Chainsaw Massacre hellscape right now.
Yep,
But
sure
I'm on there
is.
every once in a while talking about movies. So if you want to follow me there, you can.
And you should, and there will be links in the description. You can find me at DJ Talks Trash. We're doing some new shows on OSA, which is where you're at, but I'm also doing some stuff on my personal channel, DJ Talks Trash, youtube.com/DJ Talks Trash. So be sure to check that out as well. I want to thank you all for checking this show out and everybody that supports us on Patreon. Thank you for making this show happen. Thank you for supporting everything we do. I really appreciate you. And if you want to watch this live or have early access to it, you can do that over at patreon.com/onlystupidanswers. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.